The first sign something was wrong wasn't the scream. It was the champagne. 1 second it was a pale gold ribbon sliding down the inside of a crystal flute, catching the museum lights like liquid fire. The next second, the glass slipped from Nyla Gaines's fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Sharp as a gunshot. People laughed at first, one of those polite, nervous laughs you hear at upscale events when no one wants to be the first person to ruin the mood. Then Nyla's knees folded. Her body hit the floor with a dull, human sound, and the laughter died so fast it felt like someone reached up and turned the volume knob to 0. I stood frozen in the crowded atrium, my palms slick against the satin clutch I'd been holding all night like a shield. Around me, tuxedos and gowns made a tight, glittering circle. Someone said, "Is she drunk?" Someone else said, "She's fainting, get water." Nyla Gaines wasn't a stranger to me. She was Damon's executive assistant. The kind of woman who could glide through a room and make grown men forget their own names. All night she'd been at his shoulder, laughing too loudly at his jokes, straightening his cufflinks with a familiarity that didn't belong to an employee. I'd noticed it the way you notice a draft in a closed house, quietly. But you can't unfeel it. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Tonight was Washington, D.C. at its shiniest, donors, lobbyists, and cameras hungry for a perfect couple. So I smiled when I needed to. And I kept my hands steady, even while my stomach rolled under my ribs. I'd practiced it for years. A smile that kept questions away tonight. But I saw Nyla's mouth. Her lips were turning gray. And when her hand clawed at her stomach, the fabric of her cream dress shifted and a dark stain bloomed at her hip. A thick, metallic smell rose through the perfume and catered truffle oil, and my own stomach turned hard. A man shouted, "Call 911." A chair scraped. A phone dropped. Then came the scream, high, raw, and cracked with terror, as Nyla's body jerked like an unseen wire had snapped inside her. That's when I moved. I pushed through the crowd, heels sliding, my heart pounding so hard it made my vision throb. Somebody grabbed my arm, hard, and for a split second I thought security was pulling me back. But it wasn't security. It was my husband. Damon Whitfield, CEO of Whitfield Infrastructure Partners. The man donors had been smiling at all night like he was a king. In his charcoal tux, he looked like the kind of man who belonged on magazine covers. Except his smile was gone. He wasn't looking at Nyla. He was looking at me. His eyes were wide, too bright, and for one terrifying moment I saw something underneath the polish, something furious. Like a predator realizing its prey had stepped sideways. "Imani," he said, and my name sounded like a warning. His fingers dug into my wrist as if he could squeeze my bones into obedience. "Stay back." I stared at him. "She's bleeding." I said stay back. His voice was low, controlled, the same voice he used in board meetings when he wanted people to stop talking and start obeying. His hand trembled, just slightly, like his body was trying to betray whatever calm he was performing. People shouted again. Someone knelt beside Nyla. Someone tore a tablecloth into strips. I heard a man say, "She's convulsing," like he couldn't believe it was happening here, under chandeliers and cameras. And that's when the second thing happened. Damon's gaze flicked, just for a heartbeat, to the silver tray where staff had been passing flutes of champagne. His eyes landed on one glass near the edge, the one with a faint smudge of lipstick on the rim. My lipstick. I didn't remember setting it down, but I knew that mark. I'd worn it because Damon told me it photographed well. I'd stood there, smiling for strangers, lifting that glass like a toast to a future I was trying to believe in. The glass wasn't in my hand anymore. It was in Nyla's. My throat tightened so fast I could barely breathe. I didn't say it out loud. Not yet. Not in a room full of donors and reporters. But the thought hit me like a car crash. That drink wasn't meant for her. The lights suddenly felt too bright, too white. All I could hear now was Nyla's ragged breathing, frantic directions from a man who claimed to be a doctor, and the steady thud of my pulse. Damon released my wrist like he'd just realized he'd left fingerprints. He stepped back, smoothing his tux jacket, resetting his face into something that could pass for concern. He glanced at the crowd and raised his voice. "Give her space," he ordered. "Someone get medical staff, now." But when he looked at me again, his eyes said something else entirely. "Don't ruin this. Don't make me do this twice." I wanted to ask him, right there on that marble floor, "Damon, what did you do?" Instead, I swallowed the words. Because I wasn't just afraid. I was thinking. I slid my fingers over my wrist where he'd grabbed me. The skin was already warming, already bruising, and the anger rising in me was cold, clean, and sharp. I forced myself to look at Nyla again. Her eyes were open now, wide and unfocused. Foam gathered at the corner of her mouth. Her hands curled, then uncurled, as if her body couldn't decide whether it wanted to fight or surrender. The paramedics arrived fast, bright uniforms, loud voices, wheels rattling across marble. They moved the crowd back. They lifted Nyla onto a stretcher. Someone pressed gauze against the bleeding. And I saw a medic's expression change, professional calm cracking into alarm. "Let's go," he snapped. "Now." Cameras flashed. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," over and over like a prayer that wasn't working. As they rushed her toward the exit, Nyla's head rolled to the side. Her eyes found Damon. And then, in a voice so thin it barely made it past her lips, she whispered one word. "Damon." My husband flinched. Not like a man who was worried. Like a man who was caught. The stretcher disappeared into the cold night. The crowd began to buzz again, filling the silence with rumors as quickly as they could. Because people can't stand emptiness. They need a story. They need a villain. They need a reason. Damon turned to me with his jaw clenched so tight the muscle jumped near his ear. "You're coming with me," he said. "To the hospital?" "Yes." He didn't ask. He announced. He leaned in close enough that to anyone watching it might look like a husband seeking comfort from his wife. But his breath on my cheek felt like ice. "This happened right after she took that drink," he murmured. "You understand what people will assume." I met his eyes and kept my face smooth. "They'll assume she got sick at a party." He stared at me a second too long. "They'll assume more than that," he said softly. "So be smart, Imani. Be my wife." There it was again, that invisible pressure. Dressed up as advice. Be my wife. Meaning, be quiet. Meaning, protect me. Meaning, if you don't, I will make sure the spotlight lands on you. I nodded once, slow and obedient, because sometimes the safest move in a room full of knives is to pretend you don't see the blade. But inside, something in me clicked into place. A door, a lock, a plan. Because I knew what Damon didn't know. Under my ribs, beneath the gown I'd chosen to match his image, my body carried a secret I hadn't told anyone, not even him. I'm 32. I've built my life on control. And I was 12 weeks pregnant. A heartbeat. A life I'd prayed for after months of disappointment and one quiet miscarriage I never spoke about at dinner parties. If there was poison in that champagne. If there was something meant to make a loss look natural. It wasn't just Nyla on that marble floor. It could have been me. It could have been my baby. I tightened my grip on my clutch, feeling the hard edge of my phone inside it, and I made myself a promise I didn't whisper. Because promises like that don't need sound. I would not panic. I would not scream. I would not hand Damon the satisfaction of watching me fall apart in public. I would watch. I would listen. And I would gather every piece of truth he tried to hide under charm and money and power, until the truth was heavy enough to break him. If you're still with me, don't go anywhere. What happened to Nyla was only the first crack in Damon's perfect world. And the next part gets even darker. Before we continue, tap that like button for me. And tell me in the comments what time it is where you're listening. And what city you're in. By the time the ambulance doors swallowed Nyla and the gala lights started pretending nothing had happened, Damon had already taken control of the story. He guided me through the side exit like we were slipping out of a theater before the credits rolled. Cold air slapped my face. The city sounded normal, traffic, distant sirens, a couple laughing on the corner, like the universe had decided it didn't care what happened inside that museum. Damon's driver was waiting at the curb in the black sedan. Engine running. As if Damon had known we'd be leaving in a hurry. Damon opened the back door for me with practiced politeness. But his fingers pressed too hard at the small of my back. Not loving. Steering. Head down. He murmured. Cameras. I slid into the seat and pulled my coat closer. Not because I was cold. But because my skin felt exposed. Damon got in beside me. Snapped his seatbelt. And exhaled like a man finishing a workout. You didn't drink much, he said casually. It wasn't a question. It was a measurement. I looked out the window at the Capitol dome glowing in the distance. I didn't feel like champagne. Damon's eyes stayed on my face, waiting for the smallest crack. That's good. The car rolled forward. Streetlights skated across his cheekbones. In the flicker, he looked handsome the way a blade looks clean. I kept my expression neutral. My mind was not on the gala anymore. It was on that lipstick mark. That glass that had moved from my hand to Nyla's like fate had made a last-minute correction. At the hospital, the air smelled like bleach and worry. Damon marched to the desk, gave his name, and demanded information. People recognized him. Doors opened faster. Voices softened. I sat in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights that made everyone look a little sick. I rested one hand on my lap. Fingers spread as if I could shield what I carried. 12 weeks. A secret the size of a heartbeat. Damon paced, then stopped in front of me. When they ask, he said, you tell them exactly what happened. You had a glass. You set it down. Nyla picked it up by mistake. That's it. I met his gaze. And if they ask why she'd pick up my drink? His jaw tightened. Because she's careless, he said. Because she's been drinking. Because she wants attention. Pick one. The words landed with a chill. Damon wasn't worried about Nyla. He was worried about the path of blame. He was laying tracks in advance. An officer approached. Calm and professional. I answered politely. I described the tray, the crowd, the confusion. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't reveal my pregnancy. Not yet. The officer nodded, took notes, and moved on. Damon watched me like he was watching a lock turn. On the drive home, he kept talking. A soft stream of reassurance meant to wrap around me and keep me from moving. Tomorrow will be messy, he said. Rumors, social media, people love a scandal, but I'll handle it. You always do, I said. He smiled, and for a second he looked relieved, like he'd just heard the words he needed. He reached for my hand. His palm was warm, his grip was firm. A month ago, that touch would have calmed me. Tonight, it felt like a cuff. And maybe you're wondering why I didn't know my own husband well enough to see this coming. Because Damon and I didn't start as a cautionary tale. We started as the kind of couple people admired. I met him 3 years ago at an infrastructure conference. I was presenting on bond risk and project financing, dry material that usually makes eyes glaze over. Damon was on a panel about innovative partnerships. The kind of phrase that sounds good on stage and hides the reality of money moving through quiet channels. Afterward, he found me near the coffee station like he'd been looking for me. He knew my name, my role, my last promotion. He said he admired how I spoke, calm, precise, unshakable, in a room full of men who treated women like decoration. He made me feel chosen. We married fast, too fast, if I'm honest. I told myself it was because we were grown. Because we knew what we wanted. I was 29, he was established, connected, already used to moving the chess pieces of his life with confidence. I thought I was choosing a partner. I didn't realize I was being recruited. Our life in D.C. looked perfect from the outside, a renovated row house near Capitol Hill. Charity invitations, a calendar filled with dinners where everyone smiled like it was their job. Damon liked to joke that our marriage was a brand. But his eyes didn't joke. I worked as CFO of Whitfield Infrastructure Partners, which meant I lived in spreadsheets, contracts, and deadlines. Damon wanted me there. He said he trusted me more than anyone. He said we were building an empire together. What he didn't say was that empires aren't built on trust. They're built on leverage. In the office, Damon was adored. He shook hands, told stories, remembered birthdays. People called him visionary. They didn't see how his warmth could switch off the moment a door closed. They didn't hear how he spoke to his operations chief, Quentin Q. Brooks, when he thought no one was listening. Q was Damon's fixer, quiet, efficient, always in the background. He handled vendors, access badges, the small mechanics of power most people never notice. If Damon was the face, Q was the hands. And then there was Nyla. Nyla Gaines arrived 8 months ago with a glowing resume and the kind of beauty that made people offer help before she asked. She learned the office fast. She learned Damon faster. At first, I told myself it was harmless. A bright young assistant who admired her boss. But admiration has a sound. It laughs too loud. It lingers too long. It finds reasons to be alone in elevators. I noticed the way Nyla's perfume stayed in Damon's office after she left. I noticed the way she looked at me like I was the obstacle between her and a prize. I noticed, and I kept noticing, because once you see a crack, you can't unsee it. Still, I didn't confront Damon then. Aisha Monroe, my executive assistant, was the only person at work who could read my face without me speaking. She'd been with me since my first promotion, steady as a metronome, and she didn't like Nyla. Not for petty reasons, but because she noticed patterns, late-night calendar edits, Damon's door locking from the inside, Q hovering in hallways with a badge reader. And then there was Dr. Simone Price, the concierge wellness doctor Damon suddenly started name-dropping, the one who could get anything delivered discreetly. 2 weeks before the gala, Damon insisted we attend, insisted I wear a specific lipstick, insisted I practice a toast. You need to look radiant, he told me, smiling, and let me handle your drinks. You don't want to seem uptight for the cameras and donors. Because 6 months ago, I'd confronted him about missing funds in a discretionary account that didn't match our receipts. He'd listened, nodded, and then smiled like I was adorable. Imani, he'd said softly, you're brilliant, that's why I married you. But business isn't always clean math. Fraud isn't business, I'd replied. And that was the first time I saw the cold in him. A look like a door closing. He leaned in and whispered, don't embarrass me again. He said it like advice. But I heard it for what it was, a warning. After that, I learned to watch quietly. I learned to copy files. I learned to keep questions in my pocket until I had answers that couldn't be smoothed away with a smile. The pregnancy changed everything. I found out on a rainy Tuesday. Alone in the guest bathroom. A test strip shaking in my hand. The positive line was so bright it looked unreal. I sat on the edge of the tub and cried without making a sound. Because I'd wanted this for so long I didn't trust it. I told no one, not my mother, not my friends, not Damon. Not because I didn't want him to know, but because something in me insisted on safety first. Damon had been unpredictable lately, sweet one day, distant the next. The kind of man who could wrap you in silk and still be holding a knife behind his back. So I waited. I scheduled my appointments quietly. I took vitamins at my desk when no one was watching. I learned which smells made my stomach turn and which foods I could keep down. And then Damon started acting attentive. He sent flowers to my office. He insisted I take breaks. He brought me special supplements from a concierge doctor he claimed to trust. He spoke about the future with a careful brightness that felt rehearsed. You've been looking tired, he said one morning, brushing my hair back like we were still lovers instead of roommates sharing a brand. I don't like it. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt hunted. Because when a man who's been indifferent suddenly becomes gentle, you have to ask what he's trying to soften you up for. Which brings me back to the gala. To that glass. To Nyla on the marble floor. Later that night, after Damon went upstairs to make calls behind closed doors, I stood alone in the kitchen and held the counter until the shaking eased. I placed my palm against my belly and whispered, I'm here, I'm still here. And in that silence, I finally allowed myself to think the thought all the way through. If Nyla collapsed from something meant for me, then Damon had already crossed a line most people can't even imagine. Not cheating. Not lying. Murder, dressed up as an accident. The house stayed quiet except for Damon's voice upstairs, calm and commanding. And I knew the next part of my story wasn't going to be about saving a marriage. It was going to be about surviving one. By sunrise after the gala, the city had already decided to forget. Washington moved on the way it always does, suits on sidewalks. Headlights in long lines, coffee in every hand, only my body refused to pretend nothing happened. At the office, Damon tried to turn last night into a sentence he could control. He called an incident review, sat at the head of the conference table like a grieving husband, and slid a pre-written statement across the polished wood. It said Ms. Gaines had accidentally consumed the wrong drink. It said the company was praying. It said we were cooperating. Nothing about the blood. Nothing about his hand crushing my wrist when he realized the wrong woman had fallen. Quentin Brooks, Q, sat beside him. Quiet, watchful, carrying himself like security and secrets were the same job. When Q asked for my badge logs to help, I understood exactly what Damon was doing, building a story with my name as the villain and his as the victim. Then the police arrived. Detective Rivera's eyes were calm but sharp. He asked me to walk through the night step by step. I told him about the lipstick mark on the glass, the switch I didn't make, the way Nyla's fingers trembled before she drank. Rivera didn't accuse me, but he didn't comfort me either. He only said the hospital suspected intentional exposure and that Ms. Gaines might have been pregnant. The word pregnant made my stomach clench around my own secret. By late morning, Aisha pulled museum access logs. Damon's badge disappeared into a service corridor near catering for nearly an hour, right before champagne was poured. And at our building, security footage caught Q entering the service elevator with a medical cooler labeled bio. Damon's silhouette trailing behind him like a shadow. That was when I understood the truth with frightening clarity. Last night wasn't a mistake. It was a plan that slipped. And by the time evening fell, I knew one more thing. I couldn't go home. Not to Damon's house, not tonight either. We didn't drive straight to my house. Aisha knew the way Damon's mind worked. The way his power spread like ink through every familiar place. Home wasn't safe anymore. Home was predictable, and predictable was what men like Damon used. Instead, she took us across town to a small boutique hotel tucked behind a row of quiet restaurants in Georgetown. The lobby was warm, dim, and empty. Aisha checked us in under her name, paid with her own card, and asked for a room near the elevator but not directly in view of the cameras. When she did it, she didn't look nervous. She looked like a woman who'd spent years watching other women get cornered and had promised herself she'd never be one of them. Upstairs, the room smelled of clean sheets and lemon polish. I locked the deadbolt, then the swing bar, then stood with my back against the door for a moment, letting my body catch up to my mind. My hands were shaking, not from fear for myself. Fear was too messy for what I was feeling. I was shaking from the cold realization that my marriage had become a crime scene. Aisha set her laptop on the desk and opened it like a medic laying out instruments. "We stay ahead," she said. "We document everything." I nodded and pulled my phone from my clutch. There were 7 unread texts from Damon. "Where are you? Answer me. Stop making this harder. You're acting unstable. Imani, I'm trying to protect you. Come home." Last one. "We need to talk tonight. It's important." Every message was a small hand closing around my throat. I typed a response with careful simplicity. "I'm resting. I'll see you tomorrow." I didn't add a heart. I didn't add, "baby." I gave him nothing warm to hold. Aisha watched me send it and then slid a small bottle of water across the desk. "Drink," she said. I did. Slow sips. The water tasted like metal. My stomach settled a little. "Now," Aisha said, "tell me exactly what you haven't said out loud yet." I looked at her. The room felt too quiet. Like it was waiting. I pressed my palm against my belly. The instinct so strong it surprised me. "I'm pregnant," I said. Aisha didn't gasp. She didn't flinch. Her face tightened with a quiet kind of fury. The kind that doesn't waste energy on shock. "How far?" she asked. 12 weeks. Aisha closed her eyes briefly, like she was counting to keep herself from speaking too fast. When she opened them, her voice was calm but edged. "Does Damon know?" "No." "Then last night," She didn't finish the sentence. Last night, I said, felt like a warning from God. Aisha leaned back in the chair. Okay, she said, then we don't just prove he tampered with a drink. We prove motive. Motive, that was the word Damon had tried to take away from me all morning. By painting me as jealous, emotional, unstable. But motive wasn't a feeling. Motive was math. What he stood to gain and what he needed to erase. Aisha pulled up a folder of documents she'd already started assembling, board packets. Shareholder notes. Internal memos. He's been pushing for that special vote. She said. The restructuring. My chest tightened. The family trust. I whispered. Aisha nodded. Your father's trust holds controlling interest. Damon can't move certain assets without your signature. I stared at the screen and felt the cold pieces click together. The sudden tenderness. The supplements. The insistence that I look radiant. The pressure to drink only what he handed me. The way he spoke about our future, like it was a door he needed to push me through. He wanted me to lose the baby. I said. Then he'd say I was unstable. Grieving. Not fit to run finances. And he'd push you to sign. Aisha said. Or he'd push you out. The hotel room felt smaller. The air felt thinner. I swallowed. What about Nyla's pregnancy? Aisha's eyes narrowed. That complicates him, she said, because now the victim has a story that points back to him. And a mother who won't stay quiet, I added. As if the universe heard me. Aisha's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Then held it up. It's Loretta. She put it on speaker. Loretta's voice came through sharp and breathless. He came here, she said. Your husband came here. My heart dropped. To the hospital? To the lobby. Loretta snapped. He didn't go see my baby. He came to find me. Tried to talk slick. Like he was doing me a favor. Aisha asked gently. Did he offer you money? Loretta let out a laugh that sounded like it scraped her throat. He offered me a whole envelope. Told me take my daughter back home. Keep my mouth shut. And everything be taken care of. I closed my eyes. I could picture Damon's face while he said it, calm. Convincing. Offended that anyone would refuse. What did you do? I asked. Loretta's voice shook. But not with fear. With anger. I told him my daughter ain't for sale. And I told him if something happens to her, I'm coming for him. I don't care who he is. Aisha's jaw tightened. Are you safe right now? I'm in her room, Loretta said. They got police outside the door now. But I'm telling you this, he's scared. I saw it in his eyes. He's scared like a guilty man. I swallowed. Thank you, I said. Please don't confront him alone again. Let the police handle it. Loretta's breathing slowed. You the wife, she said, softer now. I don't know what your situation is. But I know this. That man ain't right. I know, I said, and I'm not going to let him hurt anyone else. When the call ended, the room felt electric. Aisha spoke first. He's already trying to buy silence. That means he knows the investigation is moving. And that means he'll try to control the narrative here. I said, in the company. Aisha nodded. Tomorrow, he'll do a statement. He'll push blame. He'll make you the villain. I stared at the hotel curtains. Heavy and dark. Then tomorrow, I said, we make him uncomfortable. That night I didn't sleep. I dozed in short, shallow waves. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nyla's blood on marble. I heard Damon's voice, don't test me, like a hand on my throat. At 5:30 a.m., I sat up, showered, and dressed in black slacks and a cream blouse that looked harmless. I pinned my hair back tight, the way I did when I needed my face to say, professional, even if my heart said, war. Aisha drove me to the office before sunrise, and we entered through a side entrance. The building was quiet, but not peaceful. Quiet like a house after a storm when you're waiting to see what broke. In my office, Aisha handed me a printed, security badge timeline, for Damon and Q, 2 weeks of swipes. Doors. Access points. Most entries looked normal. Which was the point? Criminals hide inside normal. But there were gaps. Missing minutes. Doors that didn't match meetings. A swipe into the IT server corridor at 11:17 p.m. on a Saturday. A swipe into the records room at 6:03 a.m. yesterday morning. Aisha tapped one gap. Here, she said, 2 days before the gala. Damon's badge enters the supply corridor connected to the catering vendor that serviced the museum. My stomach tightened. He rehearsed. I said. Aisha nodded. And here, Q's badge follows 4 minutes later. I stared at the paper until the numbers began to feel like teeth. He's been practicing the poison route. I murmured. Aisha didn't correct me. She didn't soften it. She just nodded. Now watch what they do today, she said, because people who plan this long panic fast when it goes wrong. At 9:20, the first shockwave hit. A ripple moved through the office like wind through tall grass, whispers. Eyes. Phones lighting up. Someone in HR walked past my door without looking in. Someone in accounting pretended to laugh at a joke that wasn't funny. Aisha leaned into my office. He's calling an all hands, she said. 10 minutes. Damon wanted an audience. At 9:30, the company gathered in the atrium, the same polished stone. The same clean lines. The same expensive art on the walls meant to signal stability. Damon stood on the mezzanine, hands resting lightly on the glass railing. His posture open, his face arranged into concern. Q stood behind him, quiet as a shadow. Damon spoke into a handheld microphone. First, he said, I want to address last night. We are deeply saddened by what happened to Ms. Gaines. She is a valued member of our team. Valued, like a line item. We are cooperating fully with authorities. Damon continued, and I want to be clear, there is no evidence at this time of malicious intent. We will not tolerate rumors. We will not tolerate harassment. His gaze swept the crowd, then landed, intentionally, on me. We are a family, he said, and in difficult moments, we protect each other. Protect, the same word he used when he meant control. He ended with a prayer. Because Damon knew how to use God like a prop. Then he stepped away, leaving the microphone with our. Applause scattered through the crowd. Hesitant, confused. People clapped because they didn't know what else to do. Clapping is what people do when they want to believe the story is over. But the story wasn't over. It was just changing rooms. At lunch, it exploded. Loretta Gaines walked into the lobby like a woman walking into a courtroom. She wore a plain coat, sensible shoes, and grief sharpened into anger. 2 security guards trailed behind her, trying to be gentle but clearly ready to force her out if Damon asked. She didn't look at them. She looked straight up at the mezzanine. Where he at? She shouted. The lobby froze. Phones came out like reflexes. People love a spectacle, especially when it smells like truth. Loretta's voice cracked, but it carried. Where that CEO at? The one who ruined my baby's life and think he can pay me off like I'm trash? Aisha's hand tightened around my arm. Stay calm, she whispered. I didn't move. I watched. Damon appeared within seconds, stepping out of his private elevator like a king forced to visit the peasants. He wore a gray suit. Tie perfect. Smile strained. Ma'am, he said, voice low and controlled. Please, let's talk privately. Loretta laughed. Harsh. Privately? So you can lie quiet? No, sir. You talk right here where everybody can hear. Damon's eyes flicked to the phones recording him. His smile tightened. Your daughter is receiving the best care. We are supporting her. There is no reason for this. No reason? Loretta cut in. My daughter damn near died. Lost her baby. And you ain't even show up in her room. You show up in the lobby with an envelope. A murmur swept the crowd. Damon's jaw tightened. Q shifted behind him. Damon lowered his voice, trying to sound compassionate. I offered help for expenses. He said, that's all. Loretta's eyes burned. Your help got strings. Your help is hush money. Damon's face hardened for a split second. Then he signaled Q with a small motion. Q stepped forward with a thick envelope. Damon took it and held it out. Palm up, like he was giving a gift. Please, he said softly, take this for now, for your travel, your time, your. Loretta snatched the envelope, opened it, and stared at the cash inside. For a heartbeat, the lobby held its breath. Some people probably thought she'd take it. That's what money does, it makes people expect surrender. Loretta looked up slowly, her eyes met Damon's. Then she threw the bills in his face. The cash fluttered through the air like dry leaves. $100 bill stuck briefly to Damon's cheek before sliding down his suit. Loretta's voice rose into a scream that sounded like a torn curtain. I'm poor, but I ain't selling my daughter's blood. The lobby went dead silent. Like even the air was afraid to move. Damon stood frozen, red creeping up his neck. Humiliation and rage fighting for control. Loretta pointed at him with a trembling finger. God sees you, and if the police don't get you, the Lord will. Security moved toward her then. But the crowd shifted too. And for the first time, I saw employees look at Damon with something other than admiration. Disgust. Damon stepped forward, voice tight. Ma'am, you need to leave. You're upsetting people. Loretta's laugh came again, bitter. Upsetting who? The people you think you own? She turned and walked out. Shoulders squared, leaving Damon standing in a blizzard of money and shame. Aisha exhaled slowly. That, she whispered, is a witness. And it was also something Damon couldn't erase with a badge swipe. That afternoon, the office felt like it was buzzing under the floor. People whispered in corners. Meetings cancelled. Partners called. The market hates uncertainty. It hates scandal. It hates blood. At 2:20, Aisha came in with her laptop open and her eyes bright with a dangerous kind of excitement. He's trying to delete it, she whispered. Delete what? I asked. She turned the screen toward me. A live feed from a hidden camera she'd positioned in the accounting department months ago, one I'd approved quietly when the numbers started slipping. The camera faced a row of desks and, beyond them, the doorway to the finance admin station. On the screen, Q stood at the admin computer, shoulders tense, fingers moving fast, sweat darkened the back of his collar. Access denied flashed in red. Q slammed the desk once, then wiped his hand over his face like he was trying to wipe off panic. I leaned in. We locked him out, I said. Aisha nodded. Last night, IT owes me favors. Every deletion attempt triggers a backup and sends us an alert. Q cursed under his breath. Then he lifted his phone and called someone. Aisha reached into her pocket and slid a small earpiece to me. Listen, she whispered. She wasn't guessing. She'd already planted a microphone months ago under Damon's desk, legal in this jurisdiction for workplace security reasons. And useful when truth hid behind closed doors. I slipped on the earpiece. Q's voice came through, shaky. Damon, I can't wipe the transfers. Someone locked my admin access. Damon's voice responded, low and furious. Useless. I'm trying, Q whispered, but the system. Then change the story. Damon snapped. Make it look like Nyla did it to herself. Make it look like she was unstable. Depression. Suicide attempt. Anything. A chill crawled up my arms. Q hesitated. She just lost her baby. Damon laughed once. Cold and humorless. Cruelty or prison. Choose. The line clicked off. Q stood in the accounting office for a long moment. Phone still pressed to his ear like he couldn't believe the voice he served was real. Then he shoved the phone into his pocket and walked out. Fast. Head down. I pulled off the earpiece. My mouth tasted like metal. He's going to frame her, Aisha said. And blame me, I added. Aisha's eyes narrowed. Then we don't wait. At 3:10, Detective Rivera called me back. His voice was more serious now, less neutral. We reviewed the corridor footage, he said, and the access logs. What does that mean? I asked. It means your husband's story is collapsing, Rivera said. We're moving faster. My heart pounded once, hard. What do you need from me? A clear link to the source. He replied. The supplier. The person who provided the substance. Simone Price. I stared at Aisha. She didn't speak, but her eyes said she was already thinking the same thing. I may be able to help, I said carefully, but I need time. Mrs. Whitfield, Rivera said, be careful. People who feel exposed get reckless. After the call, I sat still for a moment, hand resting on my belly. Reckless. Damon wasn't just reckless. Damon was precise. Reckless was what happened when precision failed. At 4:30, Aisha handed me a thin report, Simone Price's background. Concierge wellness doctor. Private IV lounge in a discreet building near DuPont Circle. Cash-heavy business. A history of off-label services. No criminal record, but plenty of complaints tucked behind settlements. Aisha's finger tapped a line. She's recently expanded, she said. New condo, new car. Coincides with the Cayman transfers. Money makes people brave, I said, and it makes them sloppy. Aisha nodded. How do you want to do this? I stared at the report. Then spoke in a calm voice that surprised even me. We meet her on camera, I said. Aisha blinked. What? Not our camera, I clarified. Her camera. Somewhere she thinks protects her. Somewhere she thinks she controls. Aisha understood immediately. Her lounge. Yes, I said. We go where she feels safe. And we show her she's not. At 6 o'clock, I sent Simone Price a message from a number she would recognize, Damon's old contact list. I didn't write as Damon. I wrote as me. Dr. Price, I need 10 minutes tonight. Private. It's about last night. Don't ignore this. I waited. At 6:07, she replied. 9 p.m. Come alone. Aisha read it over my shoulder. She wants you isolated. She thinks I'm scared, I said. Aisha's face hardened. You're not going alone. I lifted my phone. I'm not. I agreed, but she doesn't need to know that. At 7:30, Damon texted again. Come home. We need to fix this. I didn't respond. At 8:15, Aisha drove me to a small cafe across from Simone Price's building. We sat in the car and watched the entrance. Cameras covered the sidewalk. Good. Remember, Aisha said, your tone stays calm. It will, I said. And if you feel sick, you leave, she added. No hero moves. I nodded. I'm not here to be brave. I'm here to be alive. At 8:55, I stepped out of the car. Cold air hit my face. I walked toward the building with steady steps. Like I belonged there, like I wasn't walking into a trap. Simone Price met me in the lobby wearing a fitted coat and expensive heels. Her hair was perfect. Her smile wasn't. Imani, she said, drawing my name out like it tasted strange. I didn't expect you. I didn't expect to see blood on museum marble. I replied. Her eyes flicked. Come upstairs. The lounge was sleek and white, smelling of citrus and alcohol wipes. Soft music played, the kind meant to make people forget they were paying to be punctured. A camera in the corner blinked. Simone noticed me noticing it. We record for client safety, she said quickly. Good, I said. Then you'll have proof of how cooperative you were. Her smile stiffened. What do you want? I sat in a chair without being invited. I set my phone on the table, screen down, and folded my hands in my lap. I want you to stop pretending you don't know what I'm talking about, I said. Simone crossed her arms. I run a wellness business. I don't know what you think I slid a printed still photo across the table, the museum service corridor. Q receiving a small package from a woman in sunglasses outside a side entrance 2 days before the gala. We'd gotten it from a nearby storefront camera. Aisha pulled through a contact. The woman was Simone. Her face drained. Where did you get that? She whispered. I pay attention, I said calmly. And the city is full of cameras. Doctor, even when you think it isn't. Simone's breathing quickened. That could be anything, she snapped. That's a package. I hand packages to people all the time. Not wrapped like contraband, I said. Her eyes darted to the door. To the camera. Back to me. I leaned in, voice low. Simone, the police are already investigating the gala champagne poisoning. They have footage. They have badge logs. They have an employee who was pregnant and nearly died. And they have a CEO who will sacrifice anyone to save himself. Simone's mouth opened, then closed. She looked like someone trying to swallow glass. You think Damon will protect you? I asked softly. Today he told his fixer to frame Nyla as suicidal. If he'll do that to a woman who carried his child, what do you think he'll do to you? Simone shook her head. Small, fast. He said it was for his wife's safety. My safety, I repeated, letting the words drip cold. By inducing a miscarriage. Simone's eyes filled. I didn't know, she whispered. You knew enough. I said. You took money for it. She flinched. I kept my voice even. Here's your choice. You keep lying, and you go down with him. Or you cooperate, and you have a chance to save yourself. Simone stared at me, chest rising and falling fast. Cooperate how? Give me everything, I said. Messages, calls, proof of payment, and if you have recordings, because people like you always record to protect yourselves, then you hand them over. Simone's lips trembled. You can't promise me anything. I don't have to, I said. Reality will. She stood abruptly, pacing once, then turning back like she couldn't escape the corners of her own fear. He told me you were unfaithful. She blurted. He said you were pregnant by someone else. He said he needed it handled quietly so he could divorce you without losing everything. The lie made my skin crawl. Damon didn't just want my body empty, he wanted my reputation dirty. I didn't react. I just nodded slowly. And you believed him? Simone's shoulders slumped. I believed what was convenient. She whispered. He paid well. And he'll blame you, I said, because that's what he does. Simone stared at the camera again, like she could see herself on trial already. Then she walked to a cabinet, opened it, and pulled out a small silver flash drive. Her hand shook as she set it on the table. Everything's on there, she whispered. Voice notes, screenshots, payment confirmations. He threatened me after last night. Told me to keep my mouth shut. I picked up the drive. It was cold metal, lightweight, heavy consequence. This, I said quietly, is your lifeline. Simone's eyes were wet. Please, she whispered, don't let me go to jail. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I spoke in the calmest voice I had. Tell the truth, I said, and you'll have a chance. Outside, Aisha was waiting in the car. When I slid into the seat, she looked at my face and knew. You got it, she said. I nodded, gripping the flash drive so hard my knuckles hurt. We got him, I whispered, but now we have to survive the night. We didn't go to the hotel. We went somewhere safer, an old friend of Aisha's who ran a small private security office near Foggy Bottom. Thick walls, no windows, cameras on every entrance, a place built for secrets. In a dim back room, I plugged the flash drive into a laptop. My hands shook so badly I had to try twice. A folder opened, neat, organized by date, like Simone had been preparing for betrayal. Aisha stood behind me, silent. I clicked the first audio file. Damon's voice filled the room, familiar, smooth, and dead inside. Simone, he said, I need something that won't show up obvious. No smell, no taste. I want it to look natural. A spontaneous loss. Clean. Aisha's hand flew to her mouth. I didn't move. I couldn't. The words pinned me to the chair. Damon continued, calm as a man ordering dinner. She can't have that baby. And she can't stay in control of the trust. I need her signing papers, not asking questions. My stomach twisted. I pressed my palm against my belly, protecting without meaning to. The audio ended, and the room felt colder. I clicked the next file. Damon again, voice sharper now. After the gala, you hear me? If anyone traces it back, you say you don't know me. You say Q came to you on his own. You keep quiet, or you won't have peace. A threat, not even disguised. I copied every file to 2 encrypted drives. Aisha photographed the payment screenshots. Cayman transfers, notes, dates. My hands moved on autopilot while my mind floated somewhere above my body, watching my life collapse like a slow demolition. When the copying finished, I opened my email and sent a package to Detective Rivera from a secure address. Flagged urgent. Then I sent another to my attorney. A woman named Kendra Vaughn, my friend from college who'd built a reputation in D.C. for being polite in court and ruthless in preparation. Aisha watched me hit send. Once you do this, she said softly, there's no going back. I stared at the dark laptop screen and felt my voice come out steady. I'm not going back, I said. At 1:10 a.m., I finally let myself cry, one short, silent spill of tears, wiped away quickly, not because I missed Damon, not because I wanted the marriage. I cried because I'd chosen wrong once, and my baby had almost paid for it. Aisha handed me a tissue like she'd been waiting for the moment. You did not cause this, she said. I nodded. But I'm going to end it. At 2:30 a.m. My phone buzzed again. Damon. I didn't answer. I watched it ring and ring until it stopped. Then a text appeared. I know you're not home. The words made my blood go cold. Another text followed. Stop running. We can fix this. Fix. Like a mechanic. Like a man tightening bolts on a machine. Aisha read over my shoulder. Her face hardened. He's looking for you. I swallowed. Then we don't sleep here, I said. We moved to another location, Aisha's cousin's place in Alexandria. A quiet townhouse with curtains drawn and a dog that barked at every sound. I lay on a couch with my coat still on and stared at the ceiling until dawn stained it pale. In the morning, the city kept moving like nothing had happened. But I carried Damon's voice in my ears like a curse. At 8 a.m., Kendra Vaughn called me. Her voice was crisp, already in motion. I got your email, she said. The audio is devastating. Here's what we do. We don't confront him in private. We confront him in a room full of witnesses. The board meeting, I said. Yes, Kendra replied. He scheduled the vote today. Didn't he? He did, I said. 10 o'clock. Kendra's voice sharpened. Then we strike there. We'll coordinate with Rivera. If law enforcement wants him. That room is your stage. My pulse picked up. Fear tried to rise, but it hit the wall of something harder, purpose. I looked at Aisha. She nodded, eyes fierce. I stood, smoothed my blouse, and felt my voice settle into something cold and clear. Okay, I said, then I'm done hiding. On the drive to the office, my stomach rolled, but I kept my eyes forward. I wasn't thinking about revenge the way people imagine it, loud, dramatic, satisfying. I was thinking about survival, about truth, about making sure my child never had to hear the story of how close we came to disappearing. As the building came into view, I felt the weight of what I carried, evidence, fear, and a future I refused to surrender. Aisha parked, and we sat for a moment with the engine idling. Imani, she said softly, once you walk in, he'll feel it. I want him to, I replied. I stepped out of the car. And as I walked toward those glass doors, I repeated one sentence in my mind, like a prayer made of steel. The gala wasn't the beginning of Damon's plan. It was the moment his plan slipped. And men like Damon don't forgive mistakes. They correct them. At 9:57 a.m., the boardroom looked like every promise Damon ever sold, a long walnut table. Bottled water lined up like obedient soldiers, and windows framing the Capitol like power had agreed to pose for us. I arrived with Aisha at my shoulder and calm on my face that didn't match how fast my heart was working. My phone sat heavy in my palm, a silent brick of proof. Kendra Vaughn was already inside, my attorney, my friend, the one woman I trusted to stand between me and a man who treated truth like a negotiable asset. Damon stood at the far end, greeting directors as they filed in. He was polished, relaxed, almost radiant. When his eyes found me, his smile held for a beat too long. Imani, he said, warm enough for witnesses, I'm glad you're here. Translation, I'm watching you. Quentin Brooks hovered near the credenza, pretending to organize folders. His hands moved too quickly, like his body was trying to outrun his guilt. The chair of the board, Mr. Halpern, tapped his pen. Let's begin, he said. Damon, you asked for an emergency vote. Damon didn't sit. He preferred to stand when he wanted authority to feel like gravity. Last night's incident has created noise. He began. Investors are nervous. We need to show stability. He clicked a remote. A restructuring proposal filled the screen, clean, strategic, and aimed straight at the one thing he couldn't touch without my hand, my father's trust. We'll move certain assets into a protected vehicle, Damon said. Temporary, but we must act today. Temporary, Damon's favorite word. Temporary control becomes permanent ownership when people are frightened. He reached the final slide. All we need is approval, he said. We vote, we release a statement, and we move forward. Then he looked at me with practiced softness. Imani, as CFO and as my wife, I know you understand what's at stake. There it was, the velvet rope around my throat. I stood. The room stilled. Even the air conditioning sounded louder. Like it was listening. Before we vote, I said, we need to talk about the integrity of the person asking us to trust him. Damon's smile tightened. Imani, not here. This is exactly where, I replied, because this isn't a marriage problem. It's corporate risk, criminal risk. Mr. Halpern's face sharpened. Imani, he said carefully, what are you alleging? I looked at Damon, then at the board. Last night was not an accident. I said, and this company is being led by a man who orchestrated a poisoning and is now trying to shift assets before law enforcement can freeze them. Damon's voice rose. Outrageous. She's under stress. She's been emotional since the incident. Old trick. Make the woman sound unstable before she finishes her sentence. I turned to Kendra. She nodded once. Aisha connected my laptop. The screen blinked, then filled with a simple title, Security Badge Timeline. The first slide showed Damon's badge entering the museum service corridor nearly an hour before champagne service. The next showed Q's badge following minutes later. The timestamp sat there like a witness who couldn't be intimidated. Damon's face went pale, then flushed. Those logs prove nothing, he said. I could have been coordinating security. So why the service corridor? I asked. And why was your operations chief there with you? Q's jaw jumped. He stared at the table. The next slide appeared, Cayman Shell account. Numbers marched across the screen, wire transfers from a discretionary account Damon labeled representation. Routed offshore, then dispersed in neat monthly payments. Rent, utilities, a car note, a credit card. The beneficiary name was Nyla Gaines. Damon lifted a hand like he could stop the air. That is private. It's company money, I said, used to maintain an employee in a luxury condo. Mr. Halpern's voice turned hard. Damon, is this true? Damon spread his hands. Performing innocence. Retention support, he said. Key staff. Not through shell entities. Kendra cut in. Not without disclosure. I clicked again. A still image filled the screen. Q receiving a small package from Dr. Simone Price outside a side entrance. The timestamp was 2 days before the gala. Damon lunged forward. Turn that off. The board chair raised a hand. No, Mr. Halpern said. Let it continue. Damon stopped. Chest lifting too fast. Control slipping like sweat. I didn't rush. I let the room absorb each piece. Because that's how you make people feel the logic, show the pattern. Not just the punch. He had access, I said. He had a fixer. He had a supplier. And he had motive. Motive? Damon barked. For what? I met his eyes. To force me to sign away control of the trust. I said. And to remove the pregnancy he didn't want complicating his plan. Damon's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, I saw real fear. You're lying, he hissed. I didn't argue. I pressed play. The speakers filled with Damon's voice, smooth, confident, unmistakably his. I need something that won't show up obvious. The recording said, no taste, no smell. I want it to look natural. A spontaneous loss. Clean. A stunned silence spread across the table. Damon surged toward the screen, grabbing at the cable like he could rip truth out of the wall. He froze when he realized what that would look like. He turned on me, eyes like hot glass. You set me up, he spat. You staged this. No, I said quietly. You staged the poisoning, and it slipped. Q made a sound, half sob, half choke. Damon snapped his head. Say nothing, he ordered. But fear is a louder boss than loyalty. Q's shoulders collapsed. He told me it was a reset. Q blurted. He said he needed her quiet. He told me to handle the tray swap. The badge route. The timing. Damon's face twisted. You traitor. Q flinched. He threatened me. He rushed on. He said he'd bury me. The doors opened. Detective Rivera entered with a uniformed officer. Behind them, Dr. Simone Price stepped in, sunglasses failing to hide the tremor in her hands. Rivera's voice was firm, formal. Damon Whitfield, you are under arrest on suspicion of attempted poisoning. tampering with evidence, and financial crimes. Damon stared at the badge like he couldn't comprehend a world where his name didn't open doors. "This is a mistake," he said, too loud. "You can't do this in front of." "In front of witnesses?" Rivera replied. "That's exactly why." The handcuffs clicked, a small sound that felt huge. Damon turned toward me as they secured his wrists. His voice dropped, soft, intimate, dangerous. "You think you won," he murmured. "You think this ends me." I held his gaze. "You ended you," I said. Rivera gestured to his partner. "Mr. Brooks, you're coming too." Q's knees nearly buckled. "I'll cooperate," he said quickly. "I'll tell you everything." Dr. Price spoke, voice thin. "I have messages, payments." He told me it was just enough to cause a loss. Damon's eyes snapped to her with pure hatred. "Simone." She flinched but didn't retract the truth. Rivera didn't stop there. He held up a folder and addressed the room without raising his voice. "For clarity," he said, "this arrest is supported by preliminary toxicology, vendor interviews, and digital evidence. We will be requesting a legal hold on all company communications, devices, and security logs effective immediately." That sentence changed the board's posture. Panic is one thing, liability is another. People who had leaned toward Damon all year suddenly leaned away, like he'd become contagious. Mr. Halpern cleared his throat. "Detective, does the company need to suspend Mr. Whitfield's access today?" Rivera's eyes flicked to the handcuffs. "If you have the authority." "Yes," he said. "It protects evidence. And it protects people." Damon's head snapped up. "You can't." Rivera held up a hand and finished anyway. "Also, Ms. Gaines is stable," he added, as if answering the question no one wanted to ask out loud. "But the hospital confirmed she was pregnant. The loss is confirmed. Her mother has provided a statement." A low, wounded sound traveled around the table. Even the directors who didn't care about morality cared about headlines. Pregnant employee, gala, poisoning, CEO. Those words would light up every phone in DC before lunch. Mr. Halpern didn't look at Damon. He looked at me. "Imani," he said, "you will remain in your position as CFO. Effective now. The board will vote on interim leadership once law enforcement clears the room. We will also move to terminate Mr. Whitfield's signing authority and revoke badge access." Damon tried to speak again, but the officer guided him forward. For the first time in years, Damon was being moved without permission. As he passed me, he angled his body just enough to brush my shoulder. The gesture looked accidental. It wasn't. His voice came out like a thread of smoke. "You think you're safe because you're smart," he whispered. "Smart women still bleed." My skin went cold, but my face stayed steady. "Not today," I whispered back. Rivera heard the shift in our voices and stepped closer. "Not invasive, just present. Mrs. Whitfield," he said quietly, "do not leave the building alone. Not until we place protection in motion." I nodded once. I didn't want to look afraid. I wanted to look inevitable. Then the doors shut behind Damon, and the room exhaled like it had been holding its breath for years. As the officers led Damon to the door, he tried one last angle, lifting his voice so the room would hear. "Imani, we were a family." I stepped close enough that only he could catch the words. "Families don't poison," I whispered. His face crumpled for a heartbeat, then hardened again. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "Maybe, but regret is lighter than a coffin." When the door closed behind them, the boardroom stayed silent, stunned by the sudden absence of the man who used to fill every space. Aisha stood beside me, breathing shallow, eyes wet but fierce. Kendra touched my elbow, steady as a rail. Everything had a reason. The lipstick mark, the tray, the missing badge hour, the offshore wires, the sudden sweetness, the pressure to drink, the emergency vote. It wasn't random, it was a design. And now the design was breaking. In that silence, I heard my mind clearly. Fear was useless. But precision could save us. As directors began to speak in low voices, my phone buzzed with one new message, from an unknown number. It contained only 6 words. "You're not safe, not yet." I looked up at Aisha, and the chill returned. because Damon might have been handcuffed. But the machinery he'd built didn't disappear just because the architect was taken away. Not until every brick was pulled down. When the boardroom doors shut and the footsteps faded down the hall. I stayed standing for a moment, as if my body didn't trust the floor to hold me. Aisha was the first to breathe out. Kendra's hand rested lightly on my elbow, not to steer me, but to remind me I wasn't alone. Around the table, directors spoke in tight voices about legal holds and press strategy, like people patching a roof while the house was still on fire. Detective Rivera stepped back inside long enough to give me a small, folded card. "This is my direct line," he said. "You're going to accept protection today. No debates." I nodded, thinking about that anonymous text, "You're not safe." Not yet, and about Damon's whisper as he passed me, like a final spit of poison he couldn't swallow. Rivera's officers escorted me to my office to collect what I needed. The whole floor watched in the stunned quiet people use when their reality has cracked. I walked through it without lowering my eyes. Inside my office, Aisha locked the door and turned the blinds. Sunlight looked harmless on the glass. But I didn't feel harmless. I felt awake. Kendra opened a legal pad. "First," she said, "we file for an emergency protective order. Second, we freeze access to every account he touched. Third, we secure your home." "My home," I repeated, and the word tasted strange. The row house had been staged for years, dinners hosted for influence. A marriage curated like a portfolio. Now it was just a building that held too many fingerprints. Aisha slid her laptop toward me. "IT already revoked his badges," she said, "and I pulled every server log from the past 6 months." I looked at her, grateful in a way I couldn't soften. "You saved my life," I said. Aisha's eyes shone. "You saved your own," she answered. "You just finally believed you had to." By noon, the company released a statement, short, factual, cold. Damon Whitfield had been removed pending investigation. We were cooperating with law enforcement. No spin, just the truth. It rattled the markets anyway. Phones rang nonstop. Partners paused contracts. Chaos always looks for the fastest exit. The board held another session. Mr. Halpern cleared his throat. "Imani Carter will serve as interim CEO effective immediately." They didn't elect me because they loved me. They elected me because I was the only person whose hands were clean enough to sign anything. When I sat in Damon's chair, the leather still held the shape of his body. I didn't sit back, I sat forward, as if leaning away from the past. My first order was simple. Audit everything, I told finance. Lock every discretionary account. If anyone tries to delete a file, I want an alert. Then I called the hospital. Loretta Gaines answered, voice hoarse. "Yes? It's Imani," I said. "How's Nyla?" Loretta's breath shuddered. "Alive," she said, "but broken." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it, even if Nyla and I had never been friends. Loretta's voice sharpened. "That man ain't right. He's in custody," I said, "and he won't touch her again." Loretta paused. "And you? You safe?" I glanced at the guard outside my door. "I'm safer," I said, "but I'm not careless." That afternoon, Dr. Simone Price agreed to cooperate. Quentin Brooks asked for a deal and started naming names. The machinery Damon built began to fall apart. Not with one explosion, but with a slow dismantling. That night, I didn't go home. Rivera insisted on a secure location. Kendra arranged a quiet apartment with blackout curtains and a keypad lock. I sat on the couch with my shoes still on and placed both hands over my belly. The baby moved softly, as if reminding me it was still here. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I should have protected you sooner." Aisha sat across from me. "You did," she said, "the moment you noticed the glass wasn't yours anymore." In the quiet, grief finally stepped out from behind my focus, not grief for Damon, but grief for the years I'd spent negotiating my instincts, polishing my pain so it didn't inconvenience anyone. The next morning, I went back to our house with officers and a locksmith. Damon's suit still hung in the closet like he might come home any minute. The normality was obscene. I packed what I needed in silence: documents, a few outfits, a photo of my father. The small baby blanket I'd hidden in my desk drawer weeks ago. I left Damon's things exactly where they were. By the end of the week, the protective order was granted. Damon's bail conditions included no contact. His access to company property was revoked. The divorce moved faster than anything in my life ever had. Kendra filed with calm efficiency. Damon's attorney tried to threaten. Kendra answered with evidence. Eventually, they stopped. The first time I saw Damon again was through glass at the detention center. He looked smaller, not because he'd lost weight, but because no one was reflecting him back as important. His eyes were still sharp, still hunting. He picked up the phone. "Imani," he said, trying to sound familiar. "You didn't have to do this." I leaned in. "You did it," I replied. "I just stopped pretending." "I made a mistake," he said. I panicked. "Pressure doesn't buy poison," I said. "Pressure doesn't plan a natural loss." His jaw tightened. Everything was going to collapse. I had to protect what we built. "We?" I repeated softly. "You mean what you stole?" He swallowed, then tried a softer blade. "You're pregnant," he whispered. "You're really going to raise a child without a father?" My hand moved to my belly. "I'm going to raise a child without a murderer," I said. He flinched. "Don't say that." "That's exactly who you are," I said. "Sign." Kendra slid the papers through the slot. Damon hesitated, then signed with a hand that shook. When I walked out, the sun hit my face so bright it made my eyes water. I didn't read the tears as sadness. I read them as release. 2 days after the arrest, that anonymous message stopped feeling like a ghost and started feeling like a person. At 2:14 a.m., the keypad on the apartment beeped. One wrong code. Then another. A shadow moved past the peephole. My blood went cold, but I didn't scream. I slid to the floor behind the couch, dialed Rivera, and whispered my location. Minutes later, police lights washed the curtains blue. Officers caught a man in the stairwell with a gym and a burner phone. He wasn't Damon, but he carried Damon's scent, one of Q's cousins. A contractor Damon kept on payroll for special errands. On the burner, there was a draft text that hadn't been sent yet. "Don't testify. Think about your baby." Rivera didn't sugarcoat it. "He's still trying to reach you through other hands," he said. "That's why we don't relax." I didn't. We upgraded everything. New locks, new routes, new routines. Kendra filed a motion to keep my pregnancy medical records sealed. Aisha arranged a rotating security detail at the office. I learned to check the backseat before I got in the car. Not because I wanted to live in fear, but because I wanted to live. Loretta kept her promise, too, when Nyla was strong enough. She gave a full statement. She admitted the affair without drama, like someone finally tired of pretending. She told Rivera about gifts Damon bought, the condo he paid for, the way he talked about me as if I were an obstacle he could move. She said she never knew he planned to poison anyone, she just thought she was winning. Listening to her testimony later, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a cold kind of clarity. Women can compete over a man and still both be victims of him. By the time the first court hearing arrived, Damon glanced at me once, eyes searching for a crack. I gave him none. Whatever mask he wore, the evidence kept peeling it back. He learned power can't negotiate with a judge today. The trial came quick. Damon was convicted of attempted poisoning and financial crimes. His sentence was long enough that I didn't bother counting years. The important thing was distance. Nyla survived, but she didn't return to the company. Loretta took her back home for a while, away from glass buildings and soft voices that hide sharp intentions. I sent Nyla's final paycheck and medical support through a fund the board approved. And I never asked for thanks. Months passed. The company steadied. Contracts resumed. The stock crawled back. And I worked, quietly, relentlessly, without theatrics. One rainy night, thunder rolled like a warning, and my labor began. At the hospital, pain came in waves that stole my breath. But every time fear tried to rise, I remembered the marble floor and the glass that wasn't mine. I remembered that I was still here. Hours later, I heard a cry, thin at first, then stronger, like a little voice insisting on life. "It's a girl," the nurse said. "She's beautiful." They placed her on my chest. Warm and real. I stared at her tiny face and felt something in me unclench for the first time in years. I named her Serenity. Not because my life had been serene, but because I wanted her to grow up believing peace was possible, even after a storm. If you've ever felt that chill when someone's kindness doesn't match their eyes, remember this. Love doesn't require you to go blind. Real love doesn't ask you to ignore your instincts. And power, real power, isn't loud. It's the quiet decision to protect yourself before anyone else decides what your life is worth. Now tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have confronted him in private? Or stayed silent until you had the proof? And if you made it to the end with me, please hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story coming soon. Tap like to help this video reach more listeners. And drop a comment with your city and what time you're watching. Then click the end screen to keep the stories going. Thank you for listening.